When you're creating a page layout, the more traditional way of working is to use a baseline grid and to justify the type left and right of the column. In this video, I want to take you through how you actually do that and some of the ways in which you can improve the layout and the actual typesetting so you don't get some pretty basic errors in the type. I typeset this document in a previous video, and as you can see, I'm working to a 12 column grid. I've got plenty of areas of negative space, and that's not really going to be affected by converting the layout to working on the baseline grid. And also the justifying the type as well doesn't really change the layout too much. So I should be in a position to be able to make the edits to this, and you can see then how it rolls through. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the baseline grid. So I'm going to go to my body copy style, and I'm going to come down to the indents and spacing, and I'm going to click align all the lines to the baseline grid. And you can see in the background there what that does. If I turn that off, see everything's normal, and then if I go all lines, you can now see that it's kind of all the text has jumped massively, and that's because of the baseline grid that's preset into InDesign. What I need to do is to come up to my preferences, and I'm going to come down to grids. I've adjusted this. I've used grids before, so it remembers the last settings you had. And so the way I set it up, it would have actually looked okay. So I wanted to make it look dramatically bad. So I went with a number that's kind of round about the numbers that the preset has. And then we're going to go through and set it. So I'm going to show you a couple of options first of all. So I would always align to the margin rather than to the top of the page. It basically means that my grid is going to start on the margins of the document rather than on the end of the page. And when I use rows, when I'm setting up a document for how I'd normally use it, I always use margins then. And I'm going to set the increments for my grid at 12 point. I'll just type that in and click OK, and we should see everything change now. It's now aligning everything to the 12 point grid. I'm just going to double check with my body copy. If I change that to 13, it's going to push that out. So I've selected my baseline grid to match my body copy. Okay, so now when we look at that, what we can see is the type's all set, and now we can't see the baseline grid. So what we need to do is go into view and come up to guides and go show baseline grid. Okay, and now we can see these blue lines that have come in, and that shows me where my text is sitting. And what happens basically when you're fit into the grid is it says there's a line here, I'm going to put some text on it. If the next line fits within the parameters of the grid, I'm going to put it there. And then as it comes along, now we've got 2 millimeters paragraph space on the end of each paragraph. So what that does now is that knocks that down to the next available line, because 2 millimeters will sort of come down here. That's not on, it won't fit on that line, so it's going to knock it down to the next available line. So if we hit the W key, you can see now that we get these kind of huge gaps in there. Now my way around that is that when I come up to my preferences and I go to my grids, instead of making it 12 point, what I do is I make it 3. So that is a quarter of the leading that I'm using in the document. And then when I OK that, what I get now is it goes to the next available line. So you can see I've got loads of them now, but what it does is 2 millimeters, and then it knocks it down to the next one. 12-point lead in, looks at the next line, 3 mil down, can't do it, can't fit 6, can't fit 9, oh 12, I can do that. So it basically bypasses the next 3 increments normally, but then when I want a paragraph space, it will put a paragraph space in there. So that's quite a good way of then being able to make it fit across everything. You can actually justify the type vertically as well. So again, I have my control bar open. If you don't have it open, just go up to Window, come down to Control, and I can use then the justify vertically, and that will then justify all my text if I want everything justified across the bottom of the page as well. So what I need to do now is to make sure that everything is lined up, and that's what it's going to do. It's now going to align everything level at the bottom of the page as well. I've still got my paragraph spacing in there, and a lot of magazines wouldn't use that if they are sitting to a baseline grid. They would normally indent the type. I just prefer a little bit of space, so that's my way around it. Now the next thing we were going to look at is justifying the type left to right rather than adjusting it vertically. So again, we can do that. We've got a paragraph style already created. So I can click on that paragraph style, and I'm going to come in here, and we're going to need to use 2 things. So we're going to, if we're going to justify, I can click in here and I can go fully justify. And then if I OK that, it should do that. And I've probably got an override up here, and I've got a line left. So I need to then left justify. And that's going to do it. Now, left justify basically means that the last line, the last word on the line is not going to be dragged out. Now then, when we look at this, this is pretty awful. You can see here, we would call this a lake in typographical terms, where you've got a huge gap like that. And if we've got any areas where you can see there's a huge gap here running all the way through, again, we call that a river. So, you know, we're sort of full of rivers and lakes here. It's almost like a map of Tasmania, this thing. There's so many rivers and lakes in it. So we need to work on that. You can't just select justify type and go, yeah, it's done. You know, I'm away now. My job is finished. So I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to show you some of the ways that you can improve this. So if you go back to justify, these are the settings that it's working to at the moment. So the word spacing, it's saying that from my normal word space, which is the desired in here, I can go to 80% of what is my desired word space just to try and fit some words on a line, or I can drag it out to 133% here. And so that's why we get things like this and this one. So what I'm going to do is we're going to try and soften that off. At the moment, it's doing all the work on the word spacing. Letter spacing is not doing anything. So I'm going to bring this down to 120. Might not do a lot. And I'm going to take this one up to 99. Again, might not do a lot. It's done a bit. You can see it's moved some text around, and it's not really done a huge amount of improvement, and that bit's not going to do that. We need to actually help the word spacing by putting some options into the letter spacing as well. So if I was to add, let's say 4% here, I'm just going to hit the tab key. So if I hit the tab key, it moves it on. But what I can do is I can still keep the window open. So I'm sort of designing as I go. And I'm not really committing to it yet. I'm sort of having a look and a feel and see what it's going to look like. And I'm going to make the desired 2%. And I might go -1%. It's not really going to give me a lot, that. Now maybe my desired word space, if I try 5, Again, you can see it's kind of doing little bits in here. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to even out the spacing so we don't get any huge rivers and lakes. This subhead, we can fix that. That's an easy fix. You see here, we've kind of got rid of a lot of it, but not everything. So we need a bit of help. So the way to help it is to turn hyphenation back on. And hyphenation is just going to help create not a necessarily desirable look and feel, because I'm not a big fan of hyphens, but by turning the hyphens on, well, it's kind of helped with a lot of my spacing issues that I had. Again, we can control that. When you sort of run around the document, you might find like here we got DE and then enveloped down there. I don't think that looks so great. So again, we can control that. So what we can do in here is we can select words with at least 8 letters. Okay, so I'm not going to divide any words that are less than 8 letters long, and I'm going to split them down the middle. Okay, so I'm saying that I need at least 4 letters on any given line. So here now we've got emergence and experience. Looks a little bit more even than what it did. And I'm also then going to come down here, and the hyphen limit I'm going to put to 1, which basically means that when there's a hyphen here, I can't hyphenate the next line. The hyphen zone, we don't need that when we're justifying type. That only works if you've got left align type, and basically what that says is that anywhere within 12.7 millimeters of the end of the line, we can hyphen, which is huge. So, but it doesn't work when it's justified, because basically everything's going to be aligned down the right, so we don't need to worry about that. We can go for a better spacing or fewer hyphens, but we've kind of set it at 1 here, so that's sort of almost redundant. The next thing we can look at then is hyphenating capital words. So if you've got a name, so if you've got Victoria or Melbourne, we can turn that off. So we don't want to hyphenate any words with capitals in them. So we're not splitting up names. The last word on a line. So you can see here you've got innovation split. So if we turn that off, again that's going to fix that. And then hyphenating across columns basically means if you've got a hyphen down here, it won't hyphen up to the next one there. I'm not really that fussed about that one, so I'm okay. I'm going to leave that. So that's kind of changed up what we can do in here. So I might be able to have a little bit more of a play with some of this spacing now, because we've got a little bit more flexibility. It's not trying to do it all with every word that's on the line. We've given it the chance to knock part of a word down to improve my spacing. So we might be able to kind of add a little bit more in here. And again, it's just going to build out the spacing in the letters and help sort of even that out. So we're going to avoid all of the rivers and things like that. I try to avoid kind of big swings in here, like big numbered variants. To me, typography is when you're finessing it like this. It's a little bit like the old Johnny Cash song, "One Piece at a Time." It's a song where he works in an automotive manufacturer, and he steals the car one piece at a time, so nobody ever sees him stealing it. He doesn't just like jump in a car and drive off with it. He steals it one element at a time. Typography is a little bit like that. If you sort of steal in a bit here and a little bit there, it means it's not as noticeable. I could squash this type up and make everything fit on a line, and you'd have this line here, the text would be 100% of its width, and the next line it would be 80% of its width, but it all fitted, but it just looks terrible. So it's all about trying to just nibble a little bit here and there, and that's going to help you then make the type look more consistent. So I think that now we've kind of got some blocks of type that's working quite nicely. Our subhead isn't. So we can go in here, and because it's based on body copy, it would have taken on board some of the things we've got. So we don't need left justify, we can just go to left. And you can see now that as soon as I turn that off, it fixes that. So I just turn preview off, it goes from that We're just looking down here, the arrival of the international style. Turn on preview, and because I've just jumped to left align, then that should all be okay. And then my justification, again, go align left in there. So that updates the subheads. There is one last thing to look at, which is the paragraph spacing. Now the final thing to look at is the paragraph spacing. With my more modern layout where I had the type left aligned with ragged right edges, I was running a paragraph space, and then we updated the design to this layout and justified the type, but I maintained the paragraph space. So I can remove that by going into the indents and just get rid of the space after. And what that does then is that will sit everything on the grid. And I could, if I wanted to, just go back to the baseline grid and get rid of the 3 point and make it 12 points, and then everything would sit on the grid there. There are a couple of things that we could still look at. At the moment, the start of a paragraph is a little bit harder to see because we don't have that paragraph spacing. And the way to fix that then would be to go to the indents and just come to first line indent. And if I just put a little bit of an indent on there, you can see now I've got 5 millimeters. 4 would make sense because I've been running 4 millimeter gutters, and so as a number that sort of works with everything else. And then if I just OK that, you can see now that the first line of a paragraph is a little bit easier to see. One downside is you can see that it's done it to my subheads. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to undo that, and I'm going to go to my subhead, and I'm going to make that no longer based on the body copy. It's not going to change anything else in the subhead. But now if I come back into my body copy and I go to indent and I go first line and I make that 4, you can see now that the subhead hasn't changed. So you can actually adjust that afterwards as well. So this gives us that more traditional no paragraph spacing and an indent for the first line, so that you can see where the text starts a little bit more easily. And then, you know, that would be fitting in then with that sort of more traditional layout. So there you go. That's how to do it the old-fashioned way, and to set your type as if you were working in a magazine or a newspaper. I hope you found it useful and you can apply that into some of your designs.